everyone, we're live. Thank you for joining our Hangout. I am here with Hannah Abaza and Pam Vaughn, and we're excited to talk to you about generating leads and traffic on your blog without creating new content. Super excited about this today. First things first, this Hangout is being recorded on YouTube. So after the Hangout, I'll send out an email with links to blog posts, the recording, everything you need to follow up. So if you have questions during, just tweet at HubSpot or at Uberflip or at the presenters, and we'll try and get to as many questions post-Hangout as possible. To intro presenters, first we have Hannah Abaza. She's the VP of Marketing at Uberflip. She leads Uberflip's content marketing strategy with a highly data-driven approach, and will be sharing a ton of insight today on how to build a remarkable content experience. And we have Pam Vaughn, who is our resident optimization expert at HubSpot. She's increased our organic search to the blog over 125%. And has run a lot of cool experiments on our blog and on CRO, so we're excited to have her with us today. Without further ado, Hannah, take it away.
Thanks so much, Christine. Really excited to be here. And I actually chatted with Pam earlier about some of the stuff she was going to talk about, so I'm really excited to hear about that as well. But I guess just to kick things off, the first thing I kind of wanted to do was set a little bit of context for everybody. So obviously we're going to be talking about how to really optimize your blog and generate leads without having to just create more and more content. And I think as marketers, we often fall into the trap of, oh, we need to create, crank out as much content as possible. So today, both Pam and I are going to try and take a step back and say, okay, how can we approach things a little bit more strategically? So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of creating a high converting content experience. What is that experience when people are consuming your content? What are the different mechanisms you need in order to actually generate leads? And then I'll kick it over to Pam, and she will talk a little bit about what she did around some of the historical optimization for HubSpot's blog, which is pretty cool, if I do say so myself. So I'm going to share some slides with you guys just to set some context, as I said earlier. So I absolutely love pina coladas. And, you know, do I want to be drinking my pina colada in this dingy, dark, damp basement, or do I want to be drinking that pina colada on a beach in Hawaii? Now, obviously, the beach in Hawaii is definitely the preferable choice, and I think most of you would agree with me. And really, it's because it all comes down to the experience, right? It could be the exact same pina colada, it could taste exactly the same, but the reality is, the experience is what sets it apart. Now, I want you to think about your content in the same way. You could have exactly the same blog post, exactly the same words, but how you package them, the experience when somebody hits your blog or your site or your resource center, wherever your content is housed, that's what's really going to set you apart, and that's what's actually going to help you meet your goals as a marketer. And in this case, we're talking a lot about lead generation, so we're going to focus on that today. Now, the reality is that when it comes to content, companies are creating more content than ever before. And I said this a little bit earlier around, you know, as marketers, we constantly fall into this, you know, trap of creating more and more and more content. And I think we've all sort of been guilty of it. But roughly the same percentage, a little bit less, of marketers say that they're actually unsuccessful about proving ROI. So to me, this is an indicator that we really need to step back and we need to say, okay, we've got all this content, we kind of sort of maybe know it works, how can we actually optimize it and make sure that we're hitting our goals using this content? So the dirty little secret that I'm going to let you guys in on is that great content isn't enough anymore. You really need a remarkable content experience in order to meet your goals as a marketer. Now, how do you actually do this? How do you optimize for lead generation? Well, that's a massive question, and there are a lot of different ways we could do it, you know, part of which both Pam and I will touch on today. But one of the really big things that, unfortunately, I see missing from a lot of blogs and resource centers is really clear and compelling calls to action. And it's not always that they're missing, but it's that how they're implemented and the experience isn't necessarily one that leads towards conversion. So when we're looking at calls to action, we really want to talk about making that call to action clear, contextual, and targeted. And I've got some great examples that we can kind of refer to in a little bit, but really kind of honing in on how do we make that call to action really work for us. Well, first one is clarity. So is your call to action really valuable and really obvious? And this is an image I absolutely love. I took it actually at a conference I was speaking at in Las Vegas. Shocker. But when you walk into the elevator and you look at the buttons, you know exactly what they want you to do. You know what the call to action there. It's super obvious, and what you're getting out of it is super obvious as well. You get to go to the casino and spend all your money. So making sure that the calls to action on your blog are equally as relevant. Now, the next thing that I find is often missing, and I'll give you guys a really good example here, is context. So when we're talking about context, it's really what sets apart a very well optimized call to action versus one that might be converting sort of okay. And when you look at this guy, this image, what do you think I searched to find this? Pam, any guesses?
Complete failure.
So you would think something like that, but really context is everything. So while you might think that, that was the saddest day of his life, when you looked at the previous image, I'm looking at it now, and it's presumably, I hope, the happiest day of his life. So the same sort of things apply to your call to action, right? It's really all about context. And here's an example of bad context. So this is actually a blog post from our blog at Uberflip, and the blog post title was Advanced Marketing with Smart Filters. And obviously by the title, you know that we're targeting people that are a little bit more advanced in marketing. And then right beside it, there's an ebook for beginner marketers. Does that make any sense at all?
Absolutely not.
No, not at all. And unfortunately, this is something that I see all the time, right? People will put a static call to action for the one ebook that they're promoting across all of their blog posts, even though it's not really in line with the content that the person is reading. So the likelihood of people to convert on that ebook is really, really low. Now, let's actually switch this up a little bit. So instead of my ebook for beginner marketers, I changed it, and now I've got my ebook for advanced marketers. This is much more in line with the audience that's reading this post. This has context to the content that they're consuming. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense to me.
Cool. So next thing that I see often kind of missed is really targeting in calls to action. So this is actually one of my favorite calls to action because it's really, really, really targeted, and it pretty much has a 100% conversion rate, right? Every time Batman sees the bat signal, he comes. He rarely ever misses that. And I think with us and our calls to action, we really need to be thinking in the same way in how do you actually do that. So I've got a couple of really good examples here around how you can do that. So number one, this is actually from the HubSpot blog. And Pam, I don't know if you guys are still using this one, but I remember grabbing this screenshot, or actually somebody on my team grabbed this screenshot. And I loved this because it was super targeted, super personalized. This was a little pop-up as I was leaving the HubSpot blog. And literally all I had to do, or all Francois had to do from my team at this point, was click that subscribe button. And I don't have visibility, obviously, into how well this did, but this actually made for a really great experience. I was on HubSpot's blog. I know they've got really good content. Yeah, why not subscribe? It's very little effort for me. I don't even need to type in my email address. I just need to click the button. Make sense?
To clarify, Hannah, yeah, that we still actually do have that on our blog, and it does do well, which is why we still have it on the blog. So yeah, I'm glad you love it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was going to ask you actually what the results on that were, and kind of sort of inspired by this, we do something similar on our blog as well. And when we implemented this, we saw a 9x increase in subscribers in a month. And it's the same sort of idea where you want to make sure that it's a really good experience, especially when you're dealing with pop-ups. And you're trying to stimulate subscribers, which in my mind is kind of a step before leads, because you don't really necessarily know if they're super qualified yet. You just know they're engaging with your content. And just implementing this, like I said, we saw really good results, but the reality is you need to implement these types of things in a way that is still a good experience. We've all been on those sites where you get a gazillion pop-ups here and there, and all you're doing is Xing out of stuff for like 3 minutes, right?
And Hannah, actually, so the way that exit pop-up works is we won't show it to you if you're already a subscriber. So awesome. We're not showing you something that isn't relevant to you. Mm-hmm. We're making sure that you're on the page for a certain amount of time, because we want to make sure that you're actually engaging with the content and we have a sense that you might be interested in reading more. And then if you do go and you X out that modal before subscribing, we have something set up where you won't see that again for quite a while if you come back to the blog and exit. So yeah, it's been really awesome for us.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually love that you guys do that because we have some very similar parameters set up where if you're subscribed, we don't show it. We don't show it for, I think we have it set for like a few weeks after you've X'd out of it. So yeah, and I think you guys do really well too, is that's the whole point behind kind of using it, getting the results from it, but also making sure you're still doing it in a way where the experience really matters. Other things you want to look at when you're really optimizing for lead generation is more examples around contextual content, right? So I showed you an example earlier. We talked about how to implement calls to action in a way that made sense with the experience. This is another example from you guys, Pam. The blog post title of this is what to do if your website traffic is down. And then they've got this great call to action around, hey, how do you get found by Google? By taking advantage of what your competitors already know. Really related call to action, really related ebook, and very contextual to the topic that the person is reading. So again, really solid example here of that call to action. And then another one around the experience as well is actually a company called Monetate, who tested various options around their lead generation. So this actually is an example of the exact same ebook. And what they did was they tested a traditional landing page on the left here, you saw it, and they tested that versus gating the ebook using just like an overlay, kind of like a pop-up, but one that you can't dismiss. So they used it for gating the ebook. And they actually saw a 250% increase in conversion. Now, that's not to say that that's always going to work better than a landing page, but the reality is, as marketers, we need to test different things when it comes to optimizing the user experience and when it comes to generating leads. And we need to make sure that we have the tools to be able to do that. The other aspect that I find is often overlooked when it comes to generating leads through content, when it comes to creating that really great experience, is the after effect. So, and Pam, I'm sure you've seen this too, where we really focus on, okay, how do we get them to the site? How do we get them to the blog? How do we get them converting? And then what, right? You want to make sure that experience actually sort of travels all the way through that buyer journey. So this is where the nurture side of it comes to effect. So this is an example of a webinar we did with the fine folks from Wistia, I believe. And you have to put as much thought into the follow-up as you do to the actual piece of content itself. This is an example of the email that we sent out using HubSpot, incidentally. And the email was very targeted to the people that watched the webinar. The message was very targeted. We included an image of the video, which tends to convert really well in email, but also in blog posts. And it was targeted, it was timely, it was sent immediately after the webinar, it had useful resources, and it had a 54% open rate and an 18% click-through rate, which is pretty decent considering the size of that list, because we had a lot of people register for that webinar. So that's the other big thing I would say for people to actually keep in mind when they're thinking about that experience is really, yes, focus on optimizing sort of the front end of your blog. Yes, focus on the user experience. Yes, put in those mechanisms to generate lead, calls to action that are contextual, calls to action that are actually going to convert, but don't forget about that after effect, right? So what happens when you actually get that conversion? And it's not just a matter of setting up a whole bunch of emails. It's a matter of making sure the experience is consistent all the way through. So, you know, we can go back and forth sort of on experience, but Pam, I'd love to dig a little bit deeper around some of the stuff that you did, going deep on optimizing some of the historical blogs, because I think that's another big component of leveraging what you've got instead of creating more.
Absolutely, and one of the things that you first said when you started presenting was about how much content there is out there already, and so I think that's a great segue here. And so let me just show you. That did not work. Hold on 1 second. Let me try this again.
Crazy zooming in and out happening.
A weird inception thing I was
experiencing. That was?
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay. All right, so I may just need to speak to my slides for whatever reason. Let me try it one more time. No? Okay. This is what happens when you put two mirrors next to each other. All right, so you guys are just going to have to deal with my face. I hope that's all right, but let me just get my slides up so I have them for reference. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to talk mainly about this historical optimization project that we have been working on at HubSpot. It's really paid off for us. It's been essentially a game changer for our blog strategy. And then after that, I'm going to talk a little bit to, and Hannah, you mentioned this as well, testing things for yourself and why you need to beware best practices. And we'll talk a bit about that. All right, so this whole content saturation dilemma. There is so much content out there that, now that content marketing has been adopted by so many businesses realize it's important to blog and create content as a way to attract people to their website. My slide would show this chart that WordPress puts out every month of the number of blog posts that got published just on the WordPress platform. Essentially 55 million blog posts just on WordPress alone get published a month. And, that doesn't even take into consideration all the other blogging platforms. HubSpot has a blogging platform. There's tons of other platforms, media. There's so many content platforms out there. And so as you can imagine, as we're increasing the amount of content that gets published, it's harder and harder to break through that clutter if you're a business. There's more and more competition. It makes it harder for your stuff to get found in search, just in the web in general. And people are increasing their content consumption, so content output is increasing, but content consumption is not increasing. So we thought about this problem a lot at HubSpot. We want to continue to grow and scale our blog. So we were trying to figure out a way to do that in a smart way that wasn't just creating more and more and more content. And actually, so we did some digging. We looked at our data and we realized that 76% of the monthly views we get to our blog are from old posts. So posts that were not published in that month, posts that were published in months and years prior to that. And then when we looked at lead generation, we realized that 92% of our leads also came from old posts, which was really staggering to us because most of our blogging team was their day-to-day focused on creating new content. So we came to two conclusions from that analysis that we did. The first was we should look at the posts that are old and still generating a lot of traffic. These posts are mainly getting all that traffic from search. And we should find the ones that are getting a lot of traffic but aren't converting well and figure out how we can conversion optimize those posts so that we're getting more out of the traffic that we're getting to them. And then second, look at the posts that are converting very well, but we don't really have a lot of traffic going to them, and see if there's a way that we can increase their rankings in search and dump some more of that search traffic onto those posts that we know will convert well. In other words, we were just trying to get more out of the content we already have, and we have a lot of content on the blog, and I think any blog that's been around for quite a while has the same exact situation going on. They have a lot of content that's still getting found in search, but if that content was put out years and months ago, then it's not necessarily the most up-to-date, fresh content. So when we tackled the whole conversion side of things, what we realized the best approach was to first identify what those high-traffic, top-viewed posts were, then figure out what keywords people were using, knowing that all this traffic to these posts were coming from search, figuring out what keywords people were using to find those posts. So essentially identifying the keywords, the high-volume keywords that the post was ranking for. And then what we did was take those keywords and we incorporated them into the calls to action within the post. So like Hannah was saying about being super relevant in your calls to action, this was really important to us from a search perspective because people were searching for specific topics, and we wanted to make sure that the offer we were giving them aligned with those topics too. And so we did this in a number of ways. I wish I had my visuals to show you here, but we incorporated what I'm calling an anchor text CTA. So within the very first couple of paragraphs, The example I like to give is we have a blog post about how to write a press release, and we basically, that post ranks really high for how to write a press release and press release template. And so we incorporated just a text-based call to action that basically reads, download our free press release template here within the body copy of the post, and it's just a fully linked block of text, a little bit larger than the rest of the body copy. We also incorporated the keyword press release template with our offer that was a free press release template into the slide-in CTA. So essentially, a slide-in as you scroll down the page a ways, and then a CTA kind of slides out at you, which you can X out, and it doesn't really cover up any of the content. So speaking to that experience point that Hannah made in her half of the presentation, and then an end of post call to action. So just kind of like a banner CTA, and actually it was on one of the slides that Hannah showed, one of those CTAs that also incorporated that free press release template copy. And in some cases, we even created new offers, completely new offers for posts that were getting a ton of traffic, but we didn't really have a very relevant offer to give them. And that worked really well. Essentially, on these posts where we conversion optimize this way, we doubled the conversion rate for the most part. That press release post specifically. Let's see. So yeah, and so this has led us to this, coupled with what I'm going to talk about next, which is the search engine optimization side of things. We basically increased our organic search leads to the blog by 85% in the last 12 months. And we've been doing this for almost 2 years now. We've been following this strategy. So then from the search side of things, if you remember, the goal here was to figure out which posts are converting well and try to get them to rank better in search. So the approach here was we would identify those old posts that converted well and figure out what keywords they were ranking for, and identify the posts that had page 1 potential. So essentially we were trying to find posts that ranked on the bottom of page 1 of Google, or maybe page 2, for a keyword that had potential. So maybe the keyword, like a high volume keyword, and the idea was that we would then take that post and we would update it. So like I said, a lot of these posts that are ranking in search have been around for a while and have a lot of outdated information. Maybe they, our quality bar has been raised a little bit since we first wrote it, and maybe we just didn't write the most comprehensive post about that topic. And that's kind of the goal with these, is to make them, to improve the quality of the post, to update any outdated information, add more visuals, just basically trying to make the post the best post it is about that topic on the web. And then also search engine optimize the post. So as we do the keyword research to identify the keywords that the post has more potential for, we target those keywords in and do some on-page SEO in the post. We leave the URL completely the same, so it's essentially just like you're taking a page on your website and updating the content within it. But we change the title sometimes to incorporate some of those keywords we're targeting, and the H2s and the other headers, and the body copy of it. And then we update, and then we republish the post just as if it were a brand new post. We change the publish date so that the post appears at the top of the blog, and then we promote it to our subscribers and our social media followers just like we would any other brand new post. We also implement that conversion optimization playbook too, so we make sure that the keywords the post is already getting found for are representative in the conversion assets, and sometimes we can even take a post that is converting really well and make it convert even better, because a lot of times what happens is we've come out with a brand new offer that's more relevant to the post than when we originally published it, because we're creating new offers all the time. And then as a result of that, essentially what we've done is we've increased organic search traffic to the blog, and this is what Christine said in the beginning when she was introing me. We've increased organic search traffic to the blog by 125% in the past 12 months. And so it's a sustainable way to grow traffic to your blog, while also I think a great benefit is it's a very good user experience too, because if you're getting all this traffic from search already and it's going to these out-of-date posts, then the experience for the user isn't great. So you're getting more traffic and leads out of it, but you're also elevating the quality of the content on your blog overall, which is a win-win-win in my opinion. So the last thing I want to talk about is this idea of bewaring best practices, and I wanted to kind of share a lesson with you. So when I was talking about conversion optimizing blog posts, I mentioned there's a bunch of different CTAs that you can try out on your blog. One of the things that we started to use was those anchor text CTAs that I was talking about, just plain text linked to an offer within the first few paragraphs of the blog post. And we started doing this right around the time when we were doing this whole historical optimization project. And I kind of attributed the success of that conversion optimization to the fact that we were targeting the keywords in those offers. And while I think the relevancy had a lot to do with it, I found out recently that placement of that CTA might have the most to do with the lift in conversions on these posts. So what I did was I analyzed a bunch of posts on our blog, and I wanted to know, while we could pinpoint which posts were driving the most leads, I wanted to know which call to action within these posts were driving the majority of those leads. And a lot of best practices, that you've probably all heard is you have a blog post and then you have a relevant CTA at the bottom. So if they finish reading the blog post, then they have a next step where you can, they can download an offer that provides them more information, and that's where you can collect their contact information and convert them into a lead. What I realized was that on the blog, the end of post CTAs that a lot of people consider the best practice for blog lead generation, they only contribute in an average of 6% of a post's total leads that we got. And in fact, between 83 and 93% of each post leads that we tracked came from either those anchor text CTAs or just internal link CTAs, essentially just within the body copy, something similar to an anchor text CTA, but kind of blending within, like for more information on how to search engine optimize your blog, download this free ebook. The combination of those two generated the majority, vast majority of leads for each post. And then between 47 and 93% of the post leads came from that anchor text CTA alone. And I think what I learned from that was, we just kind of assumed that our leads came from, the CTA at the end of the post. But when we really dug down into it, we realized that the placement was a big issue, because our posts are also very long in the marketing blog. A lot of times people don't make it to the end, so they never even see the CTA at the bottom. And so by adding that anchor text CTA at the top, especially when it aligns with the search term that the person's using, because they see it more often than the bottom of the post, that's where the majority of our leads came from. And what's also really interesting is I've then tested some of this stuff also on our sales blog, which tends to publish posts that are a lot shorter. And the end of post CTA actually performs pretty well. So the lesson here, I think, is to do your own analysis of your own blog, to understand where traffic is coming from. One of the things we realize is new blog posts don't perform as well for generating leads is because our subscribers make up a majority of the traffic to a new post, and the majority of our subscribers are already leads. And that's why old posts perform better in terms of lead generation, because a lot of the traffic we get from search is new visitors to our blog. So, I just encourage everyone to kind of take the time to analyze their blog data and to test things for themselves. Sometimes it's hard if you don't have a lot of traffic to do, significant like A/B testing, but any of the stuff that I've talked about was really just analyzing your blog, like the way your blog is performing now, and then taking those lessons and applying them to to your future tests and deciding what to do next. So in a nutshell, it's just always better to see for yourself than to just go with the best practices all the time, because it's different depending on the blog. It's different depending on the types of offers you have and the audience that you appeal to. So yeah, I hope that turned out well despite not seeing my slides.
Yeah, I think it was really, really valuable. And one thing I would just sort of add after that is really, I'm getting a bit of an echo. Are you guys?
Could be the headphones.
Could be the headphones. Oh, I think we're good. It just went away magically. So yeah, one thing I would add to that is for people just to not be afraid to actually stop and take a step back and kind of get out of that whole create more and more and more blog posts. So, I mean, one thing that we've actually started doing pretty regularly, or we're going to be doing it more frequently, is every now and then we take actually like a blog hiatus. So we actually took a week last month where we created 0 new content. Like nothing new was published, and all we did was go through sort of a similar optimization process that you did. We had, over the course of that week, picked 5 blog posts that we were still going to send to our subscribers, just like we did way back when they were published. Still focus on distribution, and it wasn't a long-term thing. It's not like we stopped creating content for months and months and months, but it gave our team the chance to step back and say, okay, let's focus on that optimization, because I think for a lot of content teams, unless they carve out the time to do it, it just doesn't get done, because you get on that creation treadmill. And for us, we actually saw like a 20% increase in page views that month or that week, because we were just focused on the distribution side of it. Same with like unique visitors or sessions, that increased as well by about 20%. Our email open rate actually increased because we handpicked specific blog posts that we knew did well to email to people. It wasn't just the next post on the list that was published. So I would definitely encourage people to not worry so much about that and to take the time to step back and kind of refocus.
Yeah. Sorry.
I was just going to jump in and say I'm glad that you mentioned that, Hannah. Somebody tweeted at me, and they were wondering about the balance of optimization versus new content creation, and when do you know when a good time is to stop creating and stop optimizing? And then once you know your tests, like how do you start the process of the stop and start, and how much you should create per month and how much you should not create?
Yeah.
One of the things that I was going to add was we've essentially just worked this into our editorial strategy. So we do 2 posts a week where we probably would have just published a brand new article. We update and republish an old post. And a lot of times it's a lot less work than creating a new post from scratch. Sometimes it's not, because the post is so out of date and it needs some work. But if it's a post that is fairly evergreen and it could just use some freshening up and maybe add some more examples to make it more valuable for readers, that post could take a lot less time than writing something from scratch. So that's kind of how we balance it. One of the things that you should know is you need to have, you need to have that old content on your blog to begin with in order to tackle this. So you have to build up some content over time and have stuff worth optimizing. But I don't think you have to sacrifice one for the other. I think you can make it part of your strategy.
Yeah.
We publish a lot. We publish, I think, 15 new posts a week, and 2 of those are post updates. So I think it's just figuring out what the right balance is, and it's worth noting that new posts do become old posts one day, so you can't just completely abandon publishing new content. So I think it's about finding that balance and what works for you based on how much you publish and what your frequency is and how much you have that's even worth updating.
Yeah, I think the key is to really just be more strategic around the content that you are creating, so that it's not kind of wasted effort down the road. And I think how do we figure it out? What's the balance? That is purely an it depends response, because HubSpot, with the volume of content they have, and with the amount of time HubSpot's actually been doing inbound and doing content, I mean, you guys are the exception, right? Not the rule with the just volume of stuff that you have. Whereas if you're brand new and you're just starting off, yeah, you want to have some own content. Yeah, you want to be creating to start to build that up. But I mean, the smarter approach might be for you to do way more guest posting, right? To start to build up a little bit of authority. So like it really depends on what stage you're at as far as a company goes, what stage you're at from a content maturity standpoint. So like, are you brand new to this, or have you been doing this for a little while and do you have content banked? And that's going to be a regular iterative process. And then eventually you can get to the point where it's just part of your regular, editorial calendar, part of your regular process.
And one of the things actually that we've learned from this for new content is that we should really spend a little bit of extra time doing some keyword research up front when we write new posts. We kind of naturally did that. We just knew what kinds of keywords we wanted to target and what our audience was interested in. But we've more recently done our due diligence to like come up with an idea, but then do some keyword research to figure out what the best keywords to use in the title and things are. There's a big difference. Like, it does help, and there's a big difference in volume whether you use one keyword. It's like, do I use key performance indicators or do I use metrics when I'm talking about this post? And so that we've learned, is really helpful to do up front now for our new content. So.
Yeah, and there's so much good content out there about sort of how to do that now. And I mean, for people that want to learn how to do that, like learn a little bit about semantic search versus like old school keywords, which I boggles my mind how many people are still very old school when they think of like keyword and keyword research. So start to think about how semantic search works. Start to think about how, you guys can Google that, by the way. There's a ton of great resources. I'm not going to get into it. Start to think about writing for the topic as well, not just like specific keywords. And keep in mind too, I think both Pam and I have kind of hit on this point a few times, it's all about the experience. Even search is about the experience, right? Like, there's a lot of really good data out there that indicates that a really good user experience actually helps with your search rankings and actually helps with SEO, and avoiding things like big blocks of text and making sure there's white space and images, and making sure that your content is readable and easily scannable and good for human beings. That not only is a good experience for the human that's consuming the content, but Google likes it too, and that's going to help all of your sort of search and your SEO efforts.
Absolutely.
Nice. Well, Pam, don't worry about not having your slides work. I just want to thank you for creating an infinite parallel universe with your laptop. I've never
That was pretty awesome.
Don't see how I did it. I couldn't tell you.
That was great. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Hannah. I'll send out the slides post-Hangout either tonight or tomorrow. We'll have everything up on SlideShare, the recording, everything in your email, so look out for that. Thank you again for attending. And then any additional questions, just tweet at HubSpot or at Uberflip, and we'll look out for those. And thank you again. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.